Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 3D Total interview. Today, I have with me the phenomenal Nathan Fowkes. I am so excited for this interview with him today. If you're not familiar with Nathan Fowkes, he's a veteran in the entertainment industry. He's worked on projects from The Legends of Puss in Boots, The Prince of Egypt, Shrek, How to Train Your Dragon, just to name a few. Nathan also teaches color and light, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I absolutely love color and light. He also teaches more fundamental topics like landscape painting, composition over on Schoolism. He has so many courses that are so helpful and so informative. So thank you so much, Nathan, for being here with us today. I'm so excited for this interview and thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm excited too. Thank you, Nettie.
Oh, it's great. So I just introduced you, but I would love if you could introduce yourself to the audience personally, tell us a bit about yourself. And yeah, the table's yours.
Sure, yeah. Thank you. I'm a concept artist professionally, and personally, I like to splash paint around and do a little traditional painting as well. So I guess I could best describe myself. I'm just desperate to make good pictures. I felt desperate, back when I very first started, to make the best pictures I can. I feel the same way now, and I hope I always do. I think, Nettie, people like you and I think we'll be on our deathbed, thinking about, oh, I just thought if I just hold the brush and just do the stroke, drag it a little bit more, I might get that texture, you know. But my primary work has been in animation. So I started in the mid 90s. I got hired onto DreamWorks, which was exciting, horrifying and extraordinary, because things were booming so amazingly back in the 90s. And so I got into animation, and I was at DreamWorks for 15 years and then went independent after that. And I've been riding that wave ever since.
Oh, how's that wave going for you? How's the independent flow? I'm sure it's probably some people might have different experiences, the transition. How has your transition from, working in animation to going independent been like for you?
Yeah, good. I thought when I left DreamWorks, I won't get too much into my kids, because every dad wants to just talk and talk about how talk about their kids, because every parent thinks that their kids are the most special out of all the kids. It just turns out in my case that's actually true. So I'll just avoid doing it. But I had twins. And it was really hard on my wife, and I needed to be home, and there was an opportunity. Things were great at DreamWorks, but I had been there for a long time, and going to the same place every day. And I got a call from Blue Sky Studios, and they just wondered if I had any availability. And this was right after we had the twins. And they said, we're on the East Coast, here on the West Coast of America, but you can work from home. We aren't expecting you to move or anything. And I jumped on it. And I thought, oh, maybe I'll do this for a while, but maybe I'll go back to DreamWorks or in-house somewhere. The truth is, I'm never going back. I love working out of my home studio. I mean, I go in, I still around town, I've worked for Disney, Paramount, and some studios that are here in Los Angeles where I am. So I do go in for meetings when I work for those places, but I do my work from home, and I absolutely love it. So that's how the transition happened for me.
Let's talk a bit more about your journey as an artist pre-DreamWorks. Like, I want to know more about your artistic journey before becoming pro. How was that like for you?
Yeah, so I like every kid, every kid draws, and that's actually important, very important part of child development. And watching my kids grow up, and they grow up, they kind of find their own interests and go their direction. And so for me, I just never stopped drawing, and I just kept at it and kept at it. By the time I was 14. I was sure I wanted to be an artist, and so that's what my free time was filled with doing that. And I eventually made my way. I worked on it so hard. I managed to get a scholarship to the Art Center College of Design here in Pasadena. It's good school. The thing I love about this school is they're practical. I wanted art, yes, to be personal, but it was also going to be my business, but how to live. And Art Center was and is a college that very much understands that, some people do business, some people do, creative, everyone has their thing, and we've all got to team up. And so artists, designers partner with businesses to bring something out to the public that's useful, meaningful, enjoyable, engaging. And that's how your career in art works. And so this was a good fit for me. And I'll tell you this, Nettie, it was also a rude awakening, because when I started, they do, I got accepted, I started college, and they have these portfolio reviews when you start, where one of their professors goes through your work with you and kind of talks about where you're going from there. And so this one professor, he looked through my portfolio and looked, and and, and I made this comment. He asked, what I was interested in. I said, I really like drawing. I think drawing is very important. And I made some snide remark like, unlike those clowns, unlike those fakers over the fine art department, because there was at that time, and still now, there's this thing, the fine artists are the people who have rejected tradition and going off somewhere completely new and different and fresh. Well, I'm in favor of it, especially now. But, at that time and somewhat now, they didn't draw, they hardly painted, they emoted or whatever it was. And that kind of bugged me. And there was this tension between, I went into the illustration department where in the 90s, drawing and painting was critically important. So I'm in illustration. There's this other fine art department. I make this snide remark. Little did I realize this professor was a fine art professor.
No.
So he said, oh, really? He said, well, show me, your drawing. Show me like which ones in your portfolio you feel the strongest about. And well, this one, this, and this one, that. And he said, okay, listen, I know exactly who you are by looking at your portfolio. You want to be the big man on campus who can draw better than everybody else. And that will last you about 10 minutes. People will pat you on the back and say, wow, you drew that. It looks just like a photograph, or it's so accurate, or whatever. And then beyond that, they won't care. And he said, he said, what you're going to have to do here is learn to apply your drawing to something that people care about. And it's not about you, it's about your connection to the audience. And that has been so to get that through my head then and now. But that's the core. Like, that is, if you're going to be a concept artist, your artwork has to reach out to your intended audience and grab them, at that emotional level where storytelling lives, and make that connection. If it doesn't, I don't know if you're an artist. So that was the big lesson and transition into the art world.
There's so many ways to make an artwork good and make it not good. There's so many ways to evoke a feeling through the artwork. Two of them being color and light and composition. So we are going to talk a bit about your contribution to both books with 3dtotal, the Artist Master Series. The one that I have right here is for color and light. I got this pretty recently. Yes.
And I have the composition one,
perfect.
Right, which I recently got in the mail.
Yeah,
beautiful,
I'm still waiting on mine. I haven't received it yet, but I am so excited to receive it. Can you tell us about your contribution to both books, both color and light and composition?
3dtotal picked the right topics to develop, because we all know, everybody knows, if you're going to be unless you're going to be the kind of fine artist that rejects, all tradition. And I'm in, it's art, baby, anything goes. I'm in favor of that. New things. But unless you're putting all that aside and trying to go somewhere completely new and different, rather than building on in some way building on a tradition, Everybody knows that you have to have the foundational skills, drawing and draftsmanship and such. But and that's I like to put it, that's the cake, but the frosting on the cake is color and light. You eat a piece of cake without frosting, it's not bad, but could be better. Could be a
Yeah.
lot better. At the same time, though, if you just eat a plate of frosting, I don't know, I won't speak for anyone else. The first 2 or 3 bites are going to be pretty good, but you go much beyond that, and you're going to feel kind of sick. And so it's these two things that come together for color and light, and for composition. And I'm coming more and more, especially in the current environment. There's lots of changes and ways of doing art. And one of the things I'm coming to is how absolutely critically important composition is in any and every case. Because here's my definition of composition. How do we take all of the crazy elements that our images are filled with and take all of those different things that tend to compete with each other, work against each other even? How do we take them all and fold them all together in a way where they all are unified in purpose for the audience? That is a very difficult thing to do, and yet it's something we have to be experts at, because probably everyone who sees this interview is a picture maker of some kind. And if you're a picture maker, you have to be an expert at composition. And so I was so happy to be invited to contribute and be a part of these books, because those are the critical skills if we're going to, make our way as being an artist. I'm looking at the contribution of the other people. It's 3dtotal invited a small group of us to be a part of the book, and I'm looking at what they've done and learning, as well. And so professionals want to bump up their game, and kind of be reminded of some foundation and some new things, but also especially, beginners who want to kind of be ahead of the curve, like know what to look for. Maybe the contributors are doing some paintings that, you can't do yet, but you kind of see what their ideas are. And so you have a bar set that you're working towards. And so it's got a good range.
No, I totally agree. I mean, the Artist Master Series for Color and Light already is so splendid. It's so well explained. So far, I'm not done, but I mean, it's a hefty book. And I don't think these are the types of book you just sit down and read at a go. No, I think it's something you read, you practicalize, you go back to, you brush up your knowledge. It's like a Bible, right? You just keep going back to these books. And yeah, I believe it's for everyone. I don't think you can ever stop learning or ever stop brushing your knowledge. So totally, I agree. Can you talk a bit more about your chapter?
In the composition book, I knew right away what I wanted to do for it when I got the invitation, because my section, we do a lot of different things in it, and we have in my section and throughout the book, my section, my thoughts about composition and some ideas that I have, and also a demonstration to put those into practice. So I got what was for me an amazing invitation a handful of years back. I got invited to Dubai in the United Arab Emirates to do a workshop on concept art. There's concept art is everywhere, in every city, everywhere around the world. There are a few, or maybe even many, animation studios, video game studios kind of popping up, and they don't always have local talent developed, right there in some places. And so there are invitations available. And so I got to come out and do this workshop. Well, one morning when I got there, the first morning in my hotel room, I got up and looked out the window, and it's kind of high up and looking out into the bay there. And it's just strange and remarkable place, Dubai. And so looking out into the bay, there's a section of buildings that go out, and most are very modern buildings, but some are actually designed, even though they're new buildings, they're designed to have a very traditional Arabic style of architecture. And I imagined, you go back, I don't know, 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and I imagined that bay with all the ships, the merchants back and forth, and what that might have looked like. And it was just kind of fun, and I had worked on the movie Sinbad Legend of the Seven Seas, where it was a mythological version of Arabia in that show. And I knew I wanted to do that painting of just kind of a fantasized version of that bay. And so the photo reference was helpful. It wasn't a direct, here's the photo reference and I'm kind of painting over it. It wasn't anything direct like that, but the photo reference was helpful to get me started. But I created that scene and I made it very intentionally. I made it as busy and crazy and as much stuff going on as I could cram into it, specifically to illustrate the idea that all these crazy things, like we said a moment ago, all these different things with good compositional ideas, they can be organized and blended into the scene in a way where they work with it, in favor of it, rather than creating distractions, and kind of just causing the audience to collapse into sensory overload. And so that was my goal, to kind of create a hierarchy. What's most important in this image, and to really play that up. What's second? What's third? And the advice I always give is make sure that you have whatever your purpose is. And this is art. It can be any crazy thing, anything. It's art. But whatever your purpose is, have that in mind ahead of time, and then make sure every stroke you put down in some way serves that purpose. And with good compositional ideas to assist you doing that, you're much more likely to get a piece that you're proud of, that connects with that audience.
You use the word intention. I have realized lately that I struggle with intention because I love learning. I might add this into the interview. I think this is solid. I personally am a strong believer on building your knowledge and fundamentals and knowing why certain things work, and then kind of finding a balance between that and intuition, so finding the middle of like, okay, this is the rule. Now, how do I bend this rule to work and capture the feeling I'm trying to capture? Now, I know all this, right? At the back of my head, I'm aware that like, okay, this, but it's really difficult to implement when you're trying to like think of composition, color, value, story, mood, all at once. Do you have any any advice at all on that? Because like
I do.
I would love to hear it, please.
Yeah, well, it's an excellent question, because you, me, and all of us, we have the same it's nuts, right? Anyone who's ever tried to learn to juggle, I learned to juggle like three. A lot of people just play around and they can juggle three balls and keep them in the air. I never got any further than that. But it's a balancing act where you're not juggling three balls, you're juggling 10 or 15 or 20.
Exactly.
And there are a few people, there's like a handful of people in the world who can like juggle. I don't know. I think I actually looked this up one time. I don't know. The record was like 13 or 15. Someone kept that many in the air at the same time and proved that they did it. And it's like that. So my recommendation, the thing that's been so helpful for me is back in the early 90s, as I was trying to launch all this and feeling the way that you're talking about, and just it's cripplingly difficult. I mean, like anyone who feels like they want to hide from their studio and not go in there. I remember feeling exactly the same way, going through that learning curve and trying really hard to practice, but it feels so crippling because you're in the learning curve, you don't yet know what the solutions are. So the thing that worked for me was I started just doing little tiny studies in three ways. Mostly at that time, let's call them master copies, but that just means any image that you admire, doing a little sketch of it, a little thumbnail. As a matter of fact, I have right here, because I have sketchbooks everywhere.
Oh, I can
Yeah.
see at the back as well, the collection of images.
Let's see. So let's see if we can hold that up.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah.
And I'll just these are just doodles.
Oh.
So yeah, so like that. And also I just the color ones are behind me, so I won't worry about grabbing those. But so the three things then, any image that I admired, I tried to do a little tiny thumbnail of it, just get the gist of it, you know. And you kind of learn what's central to the image and what you can leave out. That's a good part of the exercise when you do that. Sketching from life, of course, you know, just doing little, not trying to do highly finished or accurate, but little tiny thumbnails from life and also from imagination, because these ideas we're learning, they have to, you know, we have to bring them back out. And so I started doing these little studies, anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour. And it was so helpful that I made this commitment that I would do these every day, you know, at least do something. Even if it was just 10 minutes, I was so wiped out. I couldn't do more than 10 minutes. I knew that doing the 10 minutes, maybe that little 10 minutes wouldn't make a difference, but the difference was it would hold that good habit in place. I wouldn't, you know, stop doing it for a week and then it slipped away from me. So I've been doing that early 90s. I don't want to say that's 30 years, but it is.
It's a
And
long time.
I've never let go of that habit of just little practice studies, little thumbnails. And so you imagine, you know, you do that would be at least more than 300 a year of these little studies. And in my case, more like, 500 to 1,000. And then you do that for just a couple of years and you have a couple thousand studies under your belt, you start to develop a muscle memory. You know, it feels good. You do this and doing this with it feels good. And you put down this color and these other two colors tend to feel good with it. And so you need to overtly know theory so you can when you hit a wall, you know theory to problem solve. But you also have to have that muscle memory. It's the equivalent, juggler. That's back to the juggling metaphor. Jugglers, they practice every day to develop the muscle memory so their eyes, hands, and mind know what to do without even thinking about it. In fact, when they start thinking about it too much, they start dropping the balls, right? So that has been my process to get all these things together.
Thank you so much for that advice. On the topic of struggling with art, what are the most common mistakes that you see in students' work when it comes to composition specifically?
I had a student just recently who was asking me about exactly that thing because we all do. And the answer to his question was the same as I think it always is. And it comes back to that idea of purpose. So in his case, in my classes, and I'm a full-time animation artist, but I take a few students each term as a mentorship. And that's nice to step away from what I'm doing. And so he said, okay, so we were doing comps to work out an idea, just like we just talked about, little thumbnails. And then, you do 10 tiny thumbnails and they're not necessarily going to be good, but one of the 10 is going to have a kernel of an idea in it. And so you find that, you kind of build on it, and then you add some color ideas to it. And, 9 of the 10 of those, but one of them is going to be great, and you capitalize on that. And then you have a good idea there. And now you're meant to take it to a finish. And that is a huge challenge. And so he told me, okay, I'm working along, I'm rendering, I'm trying to take this idea and make it look finished, add detail to it as you would. And he said, I'm losing my mind over here because the more I do, the worse it looks. And no matter, I try a different thing and it looks worse. So I work over in this area, it looks worse. And so I try a different thing in this other area and it looks worse. And here's what the answer was. So when we add detail to something, we're often adding contrast. And detail doesn't have to add contrast, but when we just go on autopilot, it usually does. So contrast, that's what our eye looks at, right? It's, human beings, it's just like you put the laser pointer down and it has it has movement and it has, and the cat can't help but chase it around. Art is the same way. Our eyes and our brain are hardwired to look to where the most information is. We want to grab the most information as we can in the shortest time possible. It's probably, it's like a survival trait. You got to understand your environment and what you see.
Yeah.
Or, throughout history, if you can't do that, you're dead. In ancient history. And so this is a hardwired thing. And so our eyes go to contrast just with whether we like it or not. And so imagine you have a painting and your sketch is working pretty well, but then you add contrast here and you add extra contrast over here, detail, and extra contrast over there and over here. And you're adding contrasts that did not exist in your comp. And your image starts looking worse and worse. It looks weaker and weaker and weaker. Why? It's losing its purpose. Instead of having that knockout punch that the comp had, you're dividing their attention by putting contrasts everywhere. Their eye doesn't know where to look. And so the image falls apart. And so one of the things that's central to the courses that I teach, especially my composition course, is the design of contrast. How to do it, where to do it, why to do it, what kind of visual contrasts exist. And, in each lesson in that class, and it's the same in the book, I go through, I don't just do a demo, I kind of call out these design ideas. And we go through what kinds of contrasts exist that are engaging to an audience and how, why, and where they might be used.
I actually struggled with the same thing recently with homework. We had to paint an environment, and I did the environment, and the thumbnail looked good, the sketch looked good, but when it came to adding details, it just
It falls
falling
apart real fast,
Yeah,
right?
and I couldn't I still don't know why. I finished it and I was like, yeah, whatever, right? But now that you say that it started falling apart, and I really did not know why. I couldn't bring myself to be like, what is wrong? I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. But now that you mention it, I guess that was probably it. I guess adding way too much contrast here and there. I think I'm gonna go paint over it and kind of reevaluate and try to critique myself with that. And thank you so much. That was solid advice. That was really, thank you.
Well, yeah, you're in good company. Everybody does that, and I talk about it so much because contrast is so central. To just right down at the core. Art is human. Design is bringing bringing visual a visual interest to people, to human beings. And so that contrast thing is so core to just how we are. And so it's a struggle to our dying day. We can't just go on autopilot. We can't just emote and let autopilot, because autopilot actually ends up working against us more often than not. So conscientious design is the answer.
One of my favorite pictures from you is the real one, right? The one with the birds and the trees and looking out and it's greens and blue. It's absolutely stunning. I remember when I saw that piece, I was amazed. And this was early on, but before, when I decided I want to go into concept art and illustration. So my skill sets were basically zero to none at this point. So I was astonished. I couldn't even fathom how someone could create work of this level, because back then my skill set was very narrow, so I didn't really know. And looking at it, right, I decided, you know what, I want to find out how you did this. So I enrolled for a schoolism subscription and I took your class, and very helpful. One thing you mentioned was gradients, and I was blown away because I did not know how valuable gradients were in illustrations. And now that after learning that, every time I look at an art piece, I kind of see a good art piece. gradients being used here and there and how it's playing to help like in the piece, and it just enhances it. And it just blew my mind because I never even thought of something as simple as a gradient, you know? So I wanted you to talk a bit more about like color now. So we've talked about composition, color. What are some things that you see beginner artists are lacking in their work, in their color, that color and light that can help them if they include, or maybe they leave out, maybe they're adding things they shouldn't be adding. So yeah, can you tell us a bit about that?
What you have to do to do that piece, and I hope this is part of the answer to your question, you have to have your house almost burned to the ground. I tell that story, that's why I asked, I tell that story in the environment design class, because in that piece, the birds, the blue macaws are seen, fire clear cutting and fire burning their fluorescence coming towards them, and they're horrified. And here, everyone knows we get these California wildfires, and I live right up against. I kind of like this because I'm like the very last house in Los Angeles. Like we're the last
Really?
house,
Oh.
and then it goes up into the canyon. Like my backyard, my front yard is a neighborhood, but the backyard goes up into the canyon. And when I moved here, oh yeah, the kids can kind of play and run around up in the hills, and it's like we're not in the city, but we are in the city. What I didn't realize was that also means that those fires can come right down towards, right down to your backyard. And so we had that happen. And we thought for sure the house was going to burn down. The fires, it was horrifying. I was just shaking in my boots. But what do you do? You're like, well, my house is about to burn down. We had to evacuate. My house is about to burn down, but well, I have my camera with me or my phone. This is great photo reference. So we went off, somewhere and kind of watched where the fires were, and I was taking pictures, and I ended up using that fire reference, that horrifying smoke in the air. That's the reference I used to do that piece, with the fire burning coming towards to burn down their house, so to speak. And we had just been married. My wife and I just got married. We bought this house. Our future, and then boom, it was all about to be washed away. And we keep talking about emotion. Well, if there are life experiences that make you just shake in your boots, we've got to bring that same level of emotion to the audience. And so so I felt that, and I tried to bring that feeling into that piece. So in terms of color and light, I like to break it down in three ways, because we've got to think about what we see. It is light hitting a surface. Everything that we see is light hitting a surface. So we ask ourselves, okay, what we have to think about the local color and quality of the objects. We have to think about the color and quality of the light, and the influence of atmosphere, if any, if you're doing kind of a long distance outside thing. So there's those three elements. And then we have to think about the three properties of color, because everything we see is made up of just three things. Hue, like the spectrum, red, yellow, blue, green, purple, orange, the hue, the level of saturation, and the value meaning light and dark. So those three things, that's everything we see. So we have to be an absolute master at manipulating those three things. And then those three things actually add up. I read this interesting article in a science paper in a science magazine. They were trying to judge how many subtle variations of color people can see. Like maybe you take a brown and then you make it barely darker, maybe barely greener, barely, like that just mushrooms out. And they came up with, I think, 2.3 million variations that I can perceive. Yikes, that's crippling.
That
and
is.
So we have, so we have to have an organizing principle, and we talk about, how to unify our images. But if our images only have unity, it'd be pretty boring, same. So they also have to have contrast. But if they only have contrast, that's just chaos, attention everywhere. If you're painting, if everything in a painting is, that means everything is equally unimportant. So you have to balance unifying your image with the interesting contrasts in your image as a unifying principle to domesticate the light, the local color, the atmosphere, the hue, the saturation value. And so that's our starting point. This is what we have to be experts in doing. And then my classes in the book, we build up from there.
While I had the schoolism subscription, I also took a the Roberts and Dice's class.
Yes.
Very, very helpful as well. And
Yes.
they mentioned something that absolutely stuck with me. They said most times what you think you see isn't really what's going on. And that kind of made me realize that, like you said, what we perceive isn't always what's happening, right? And in order to make what we want, in order to make our pictures look more believable, we have to know what is happening, and we have to also try to make it work for our pictures.
Yeah, absolutely. Clarity, uh, that's why I've always liked this lone artist, in their workshop, coming up with works of genius. There are people like that. They're fairly rare. I've always liked, coming up with an art director looking over my shoulder, or getting further along, a director looking over your shoulder. And a director's usually not a painter. In animation, they usually come up through story, like they come up through the story and storytelling, story department. They're kind of writers and storyboard artists, and they will call out, like, I don't, this isn't I'm not getting the story from this. It doesn't have the clarity. And I might have thought it did, but I'm one person. I put something down, I know what it is. It's clear to me, but sometimes that doesn't mean it's going to be clear to the general audience. And a second set of eyes to point out our blind spots, because we all have them, is incredibly valuable. So good advice from Dice and Robert.
Definitely. It's totally changed my perspective in so many ways. What general advice will you give to artists? Actually, I was going to say beginner artists, but not, artists that are trying to, enhance their skills, break into the industry, or just basically become better artists. What's the best advice you think you can give artists?
Yeah, well, so going beyond the obvious, because do good work, get your work out there, find ways to get it seen. Instagram is a good, at the time of this recording, Instagram is still a good way to get your work out there. And I was talking to recently, I was talking to the recruiter over at Netflix, and I asked them, I said, for the sake of my students, how do you, when you're looking for new people and people who aren't necessarily industry veterans, but you're looking for new faces, what do you do? Where do you go? And they said, yeah, we kind of enjoy going down the Instagram rabbit hole. You look at this page, which leads you to this page, which leads you to this page, that you wouldn't have kind of gotten directly to it. And they might find someone who has an incredible, unique style, or some kind of flavor to what they do, and they'll give them a call and see, do you have any availability? Can you do a little, they'll try them out. Could you do a little freelance or something? And so obviously we've got to get our work out there. But I remember a time, I'm going to be careful here. Everyone likes to hear a little dirt, so I'll give you a little dirt, but I'm not going to give you any names. There's an artist that I know well, and I like. I like a lot. I like personally. At the same time, this artist can be difficult. An intense personality can be difficult, and sometimes to a degree, we're people, and you've got to take the good with the bad. But I got a call from the art director on a project, and this amazing artist who can sometimes be difficult, and one of my very favorite artists. And I have no shame in saying at the time and probably now, no shame in saying, probably better than me. And one of the artists I admire their work most. And I got a call from the art director who was working with this artist. And he said, hey, listen, and this is someone I also know. He said, hey, listen, I want to check in with you, see if you have any availability. I'm working with so-and-so artists on this project. It's not really working out. We're really struggling with them, and we don't feel like it's gonna last. It's not working for the project. And gonna sorry to say he's gonna have to go. Do you have any availability? Well, I was shocked. This artist better than me, but because I've done my very best, you're in a terrible mood, you drive down, I don't commute anymore, work from my home studio, but at that time, you drive through traffic and someone cuts you off, you get angry, you hadn't got enough sleep, you don't feel right. The moment you walk through those studio doors, it doesn't matter. You put that away, smile goes on your face. Hey, you're everybody's best friend. You're helpful. You solve okay, yeah, you see a problem with what I'm doing. Let's figure out how I'm gonna fix this. Wow, you're gonna love it. It's gonna be beautiful. Just come back at the end of the day and wow, I'm loving working with you on this. It's fantastic. And you just have to. And because I've done my best, not just to be the best artist I can figure out how to be, but, kind of go along to get along when it's necessary. One example is I got this amazing phone call. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it that anyone would even think of me in comparison to this other artist. So those are the opportunities that can come when you're an artist, but you're also a human being.
Thank you so much. Honestly, yeah, I think it's very important to work on yourself. I also think that reflects in your art, right? The better of a person you are, I think that kind of reflects in your work as well, in some way or form. Okay, so thank you so much for sitting down and having this
Oh
interview with
yeah.
me today. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Do you have any final words to say? The table is yours. So yeah.
Um, you know, uh, we just you got to I not you, Nettie,
Oh
but
no, I don't.
we everybody, because it's still we said maybe it's nice we started with this and we can end with this, like our dying day, we're still going to be fighting for that perfect brushstroke. So, then, now, me, you, everybody, we have to climb, we got to climb the highest mountain, dive into the deepest sea. We have to push harder than we think we can to gain that artistic and technical ability that reaches out and makes that emotional artistic connection with the audience. We have to, people out there are so good, and this is a difficult thing to do. We've got to dig deep to make it happen.